let's retouch a gloomy day dog photo together so that you can learn these techniques inside of Photoshop, even if you're a brand new beginner who has never touched Photoshop before. So once you've dropped your photo into Photoshop, we are going to go ahead and start by adding a little bit of brightness. We want to make sure we're making our dog pop, especially on a gloomy day. So the first thing you're going to do is click over here on this half circle, and you're going to go up to an adjustment layer. We're looking for brightness and contrast. You're going to bump up your brightness, and you can see how this is already illuminating the dog. But it is also, because we have that gloomy day, it is blowing out our sky. So we only want to go about halfway on this. And that way, we are not going to do too much damage to the overall photo. Now, we could do this in sections, but I kind of like doing an overall adjustment first. And then what I'm going to do is use my lasso tool, and I am going to just highlight part of my pup. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to do another brightness and contrast panel, this time making her pop a little bit more, and this time adding in some contrast. Now this will take a little bit of adjustment, especially as you're dealing with the rest of the background. So don't go too bright, because we do not want to blow out any white parts on your pup. We can see how this is already blowing out just a little bit. And if it's too much, what you can do is you can actually click on the layer mask, and you can actually just paint that off a little bit. So you're just going to use a lower opacity, 28 to 31%, and just paint it off of their nose. So now we've got a little bit more brightness here. You are going to want to make sure you're on a soft round brush, 100% opacity. So switch this over to white, and your opacity needs to go back up to 1. And from here, you are just going to add in some of that color pop. Now, if it's too bright, just like that one is, all you're going to do is use your opacity back down, maybe around 30-something%, and you are just going to click the X button that toggles it from white to black. Black removes, white adds in. So if it's too much, you just paint it back off on that layer mask, and then with the lower opacity, you just paint it on to make your pup pop. Now, what you are looking for when you do this is to make sure there are no harsh lines. So look at my dog's face, and I'm going to turn this layer on and off, and we're going to look to see if there's any harsh lines. Everything looks nice and soft and gentle. There's no harsh lines that we can see. Excellent. Now we're going to move on, and I am next going to work on the sky. Now, we are going to do some localized retouching to my dog's face. We'll get back to that in a minute, but I am going to lasso around her head, and I'm going to make sure I grab part of the trees and the sky. So once that's highlighted, I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab another brightness and contrast panel. These are big level adjustments or layer adjustments to be using when you're retouching those photos of your dog. And this time you're going to slide your brightness down. We want to intensify those dark clouds. We're going to bump up our contrast. Now that looks pretty cool. It's pulled in some of the detail, and it gives us that beautiful gloomy look, and it's going to help your dog to pop a little bit more. You can see we have this harsh line here. So we're going to grab our brush tool. Again, we're on a round brush, 100% opacity on white, and we're just going to paint it in around our dog. Now, it does not have to go anywhere or everywhere, but you do want to make sure you're getting it anywhere that is logical. So the trees, maybe some of the grass. If it's too intense in certain places, once again, you have the ability to just lower that opacity, switch it right on over to a black setting by using your X button, and you can paint it off of anything you don't like. So if the trees are too much, if you want to bring some of that green back, you can do that. You can make it look a little foggy. You can do whatever you want to make it look the way that you need to. And if you still want to double down on that dark sky, this time, avoid most of the tree, add in another brightness and contrast panel and pull it down, pull the contrast up. And again, we are coming in 100% opacity on our brush, and we're just painting that in. So now look how that really intensifies that look there. Now maybe I just want to lower that opacity a little bit and just very slightly go over the edge of my dog's head so that it blends it in a little bit more. You can see how it's kind of starting to be a little wispy here as we are pulling those things in. And I can decide then if I want to remove some of this, add it in, whatever works best for me. So now I need to do a little bit of adjusting. So I'm going to click on my background layer, so my actual photo. I'm going to grab my spot heal tool, and I'm going to remove anything from the background that I do not like. The neighbor's car, that needs to go. That house in the background also needs to go. And you're just going to do little sections at a time. You can kind of see my neighbor's little flowers down by the road there. So I am just removing the elements that I do not like. Now I have the option of blurring the background a little bit more, but we'll get to that in a minute. I am going to zoom in here so that I can see a little bit better. And I can see that my dog's eye allergies were out that day. So I'm going to come in with my spot heal tool, and I'm just going to clean up her eyes a little bit. And my poor baby has some very serious skin allergies and eye allergies. You can see how red her eye is there. So I'm just going to grab my lasso tool, and I'm going to go right around the red part of her eye. And I'm going to come down to the very bottom of my adjustment layers. This is selective color. And inside of selective color, you're going to have a lot of different options. Now, you are not looking for the color you want to remove. You are looking for the color that is what you're trying to reveal. So her eye is white, but her eye is actually probably going to be a neutral color. So white is more of a very intense white. Neutral is more of the eye color. On us, on our dogs, a lot of times skin tones will be within the neutrals instead of within the whites. So you want to make sure you try neutral first for a lot of these things, but you can go through and you can figure out what works best. Now you can see we've got a couple of different sliders that we can play with. We know that there's cyan, which is blue, magenta, which is pink, red, and yellow. And so we're actually going to remove some of that magenta. If we go to the left, we're removing it. And if you go really far to the left, it adds in green. You go really far to the right, it adds in more red, more pink. So right there in the middle at that 0%, that's going to be what the photo is now. And I'm just going to remove some of that red. Now, sometimes you have to adjust the cyan and the yellow to balance it out. It depends on what your image is. This one actually worked perfectly, just the way that it is now. But because I'm zoomed in, now all of a sudden I can see there's a little halo right here on the top of her head. And that is where I added in some of this brightness earlier. So I'm going to click through my layers to see which one is impacting her, and it's this one. So then I'm going to click on the layer mask. A layer mask is a non-destructive layer that allows me to paint on and off without actually destroying my photo. So this allows me to then adjust and tweak, and I remove that line, so I'm good to go there. Now I might want to make her eyes pop, so I'm going to grab my lasso tool, and I'm going to highlight her eye, and I can highlight both of them. So you can either do this one at a time or both of them at the same time. And I'm going to add in a new brightness and contrast panel. And all I'm going to do is bump up my brightness just a little bit. You may have to play with your contrast, but you can see I'm going to turn that on and off, how that makes it pop just a little bit more. Now to double check this, I'm going to zoom back out so I can see the full thing. And I'm once again going to turn it on and off to see what I need to do. If this was too intense, and it's not for this photo, but if it was, I could use my opacity and just back that layer on and off. So now I've got a pretty good look for this. I might actually want to tweak my grass a little bit. So this was when we were reseeding the grass and there was some hay out. And I'm just going to lasso that, and I'm going to go into, once again, the brightness and contrast panel. This is truly a savior of many, many photos. And I'm going to bump up the contrast and down the brightness until I find a level that makes it pop inside of the photos. Then again, with a soft brown brush, 100% opacity, I am just painting it on, and I'm not even going to paint it on all the area. I'm going to paint it on things that are closer up to the camera, maybe a little tap tap here in the back, but for the most part, I'm going to leave the things in the background kind of the way that they are. Now, if you really want to make this look more high-end as a photo, you can grab your background layer, and you're going to drag that onto this little box with a plus sign. That duplicates my layer. So now I've got this layer and this layer. And if I turn it on and off, you can't see it because it's the exact same thing. However, we're going to duplicate this one more. So leave the background layer where it is. We don't want to touch it. We don't want to mess with it. We do want 2 layers on top of that. So again, grabbing one of those layers, dragging it to duplicate. Now I have 3 of those layers. From here, I'm going to click on the top one. I'm going to come down to this button that says Select Subject. And when I do that, it is going to magically analyze my photo, and it is going to highlight my dog. Now, as you can see, it didn't get all of her. It kind of missed part of her leg. So I'm going to hold the Shift button down, and I'm going to lasso tool that. If there's something I need to remove, I'm going to hold the Option button down on my Mac, and I would be able to remove that, but I don't want to do that. So Command Z to remove those things. And I'm just going to make sure I have refined that edge. You don't have to get too worried about the areas where their paws are and where their feet are going to be, because we're going to fix that in a minute. But you do want to pay attention to this area up here, their head and their shoulders. That's important to make sure it's pretty right. So from there, you're going to add a layer mask. That is this little rectangle with a circle in it. And when you do that, it actually cuts out all the background. It makes it go away. Now, if I put just a basic layer here, let me just show you what this looks like. I am going to paint in some color so that you can see I have cut her out. You don't need to do that, but that's just so I can show you. On and off, I now have her cut out. So I'm going to remove that because I do not need to clutter up my space with that one. What I want to do from that point is to make sure I am highlighting my second layer, the one that I'm going to adjust. And I'm going to go up to Filter, down to Blur, down to Gaussian Blur. Now from there, I am actually really blurring that background. So you can kind of see how I blurred the background pretty dang good there, but it's also blurred everything else. So we need to remove a little bit of this because we want it blurry behind her. We don't want it blurry on the same level as her. So if you're photographing your dog or any subject, anything that's on the same plane is going to be in focus. So we need to remove this area around their feet. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer mask. And I am then just going to use my black brush, 100% opacity, and I'm going to tap it off around where her feet and her legs are. And it's going to remove part of it, anywhere that I'm using that brush. And then I'm going to just grab, I might actually want to do it a little bit higher. You can see I just kind of did a little circle around here. Now I'm going to lower my opacity pretty steeply, and I am going to paint even more off in the background. Now you can kind of see how my fence is there. That's a pretty good marker for me, but you're just going to have to eyeball it as you do this to make sure you are doing a light removal in some of those sections, and then you can paint it back in. So this kind of gives it a really nice focal depth so that you can see that the dog is the focus. Now, if you look at her ears, unfortunately, those wispies of her ears are kind of blurred. So again, black brush, low opacity. We're just going to keep painting off on this, and you may even want to zoom in on that to make sure that that is going to work properly for you. And you just want to remove as much as possible of that. And if you need to, you can even come back up to your other layer and kind of paint a little bit of that back on so that it does not look super wispy as you're doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom back in because it is not working quite the way that I had wanted it to as I add a little bit more here. So you can kind of see we've got a little bit that we need to worry about here. We're going to go in and we're going to retouch that on our background level here. So we're going to come right back in and we're going to grab our spot heal tool and we're just going to tweak that and see what happens. And so if we don't like what happens, then we're going to grab our clone tool, 28% opacity. You're going to hold your option key down and you are just going to then be able to paint. Now, if you're struggling, if this is just a straight up struggle for you, all you have to do is grab all of your layers and you're going to put them into one folder. You are going to duplicate that folder because we don't want to mess with our adjustment layers here. And we are going to then just convert to smart object. So left click and we are going, or right click, left click. I'm using an editing tablet. You're going to click to smart object and now it's a solid state. This is what it is. And you can kind of see how there's some there, there's some not there because I didn't grab that background layer. And I can come in, I can even, if I need to, I can duplicate this layer, drag that up, select both of those, come right in, and once again, we're going to make that a smart object. They recently moved the layout on this on me. And now I've got a solid image. So from there, now I can grab my 28% opacity spot heal tool and I can hold my option key down and I can blend all of these things however I want to make sure it looks the way that I need to. So if I need to darken things down, if I need to lighten things up, if I need to come in and I need to kind of paint in a little bit more of her ear here so that it makes a little bit more sense the way that it is, I can go ahead and I can do that as well. So then I can tweak whatever I am going to need for that adjustment. And then if I need any final overall adjustments, I can just do another brightness and contrast panel, pull it up just a little bit, pull it down just a little bit. And then once again, I'm going to put this in a folder and I'm going to turn it on and off so you can see what we did. And if it's too intense for you, if something is too bright for you, all you have to do is go back into your folders and change those particular layers. Or you can actually change the entire folder to come down a little bit to look just a little more refined. or you can put a layer mask on it. You can paint some of that off. So if it's too much for you, lower your opacity and just paint some of that off. Now that's a really low percentage, so that's not going to do me much good, but you can kind of see how now it's not quite so contrasty. Now it blends just a little bit better. So now we go from that to that pop, and we've got the blur effect, we've got the beautiful background. You can intensify some of that sun that's coming out here if you want. There's some really cool things you can do with that. We'll talk about that in another video, but it's a very easy way for you to level up your photos to look a little more on the professional side. And again, if you don't like how bright something is, how dark something is, there are lots of ways for you to tweak it as you go. Follow along for more tutorials helping you to learn how to retouch your dog photos to look better for yourself, your friends and family, and your social media. We've got lots of ideas on how to take really great photos of your dog from a professional photographer of 2 decades, and I want to make sure that this is as easy as possible for you. So drop your requests on what retouching will help you to level up your dog photos, what type of photos should we do in this ongoing series, and we'll see you in the daily videos helping you navigate the world of dog parenthood to help you level up for your pup and give them the best life possible. We'll see you then.